and welcome to another episode of AML Gray Matters, a webinar where we explore various issues impacting AML compliance. Today is Wednesday, 15th of June, 2022. My name is Kimberly Smith, and I'm a former compliance officer and MLR users. Today, we welcome John Tobon, Special Agent in charge of the U.S. Homeland Security based in beautiful Hawaii. Aloha, John.
Well, aloha, Kimberly, and aloha, everybody.
A little bit of housekeeping before we begin. I want to remind our audience that this webinar is not legal advice. Today's webinar will last approximately 1 hour, and we will take as many questions as we can at the end. And there will be certificates auto-generated and sent to you via email 1 hour after the end of the broadcast. There are 3 handouts today. So for our last broadcast, we did a drawing for one of our silo cooler bags, and we want to congratulate Don Katz and Cayman for being our winner. Delivery should be made in the next few weeks to you. We will draw another name later today from our live audience, and we'll name the winner in our next webinar as well. I do have a polling question to get us started. For those of you that have joined us in previous broadcasts, you know I like to ask a question or two at the beginning and then the same question at the end to see if we've helped you or changed your mind in any way. So today I'm asking you if you think you've come across a human trafficking situation, either personally or maybe as an AML professional. And when I say personally, maybe as a consumer of a goods or service, maybe you felt that they could have been forced labor or some kind of human trafficking situation. So Tom, if you want to go ahead and issue that poll, I think you are, and we give everybody, yeah, you are, and then we can give everybody a quick chance to give an answer. We have a couple of answers there for you. Do we have any feedback yet? Okay, fantastic. So I am showing that our poll question, so 63% of you are saying no, you have not seen any evidence. 11% say possible as a consumer or observer. 11% say possible as an AML professional. 7% are saying yes, that as a consumer or observer, you have seen it. And 8% say yes as an AML professional. Thank you very much, I appreciate that. John, did you have any feedback from that poll question, from those results?
I think that's it's pretty much what I expected in terms of how we think about trafficking and the types of activities that are part of our everyday life that can include some type of trafficking. And it also goes along the lines of, you know, it's hidden in plain sight. And I think that poll very much reflects that part of it.
Okay, yeah. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide, John, and I apologize. I know we said that I would let you have control, but I think that switching back and forth might have caused my technical issues. So if you don't mind, I will retain control of the slides. So just please let me know, you know, when to move on to the next one. And I want to welcome you, and I appreciate you being here. I've heard you speak in the past and was very impressed with what you've, your experience and the things that you've done in your job. And again, I just really appreciate it. So please feel free to kick off and just let me know when to move on to next slides.
Okay, no problem. Well, first of all, I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to reach your constituency here. I think this is an incredibly important topic, and it's one that we really seem to be focused on one of the issues involved rather than the entire problem. And when we do that, and obviously what I'm talking about is sex trafficking, right? When you say human trafficking, the very first thing that comes to mind is sex work. And for good reason. However, that's not the full extent or scope of the problem. And I think, you know, part of the answers to that poll, everybody was automatically thinking about sex trafficking. So obviously none of us are going to say, yes, I've had some type of contact with any kind of sex trafficking on any level, and a lot of that is our own personal view of ourselves and societal norms, right? But when we talk about trafficking, and if we can go to the next slide, we really need to talk about a broader set of issues. So today, in the very short time that we have, I'll go through making sure that we, first of all, that we define trafficking for what it is. And obviously this is going to be a legal definition, and because I am US law enforcement, I'm going to be using the US legal definition. However, that definition is based on a lot of work that has been done at the international level by international organizations, the United Nations, the FATF, and some of these other institutions. So the definition is going to be, very close, I think, in proximity to what some of you have to deal with within your specific jurisdictions. Now, obviously, the reason that we're talking about this is the risk. There are risks to the institutions, there are risks to industries, and there are personal risks to individuals, and that's the last part that I'd like to sort of talk to all of you about, because you may be in a position to help in multiple ways. Obviously, when we do these types of sessions, people are always talking about how, what can I do to find the bad guys? We need to find the bad guys. It's the bad guys, the bad guys, the bad guys. And that is true, and that is noble. However, this is a situation where we also have a lot of good guys. And those good guys are victims, and we want to help usher them into, to making them survivors. But they're going to face some challenges along the way that financial institutions are positioned in the perfect place to provide that hand up, if you will, to get them to that next level. So if we can go to the next slide, I had left questions for the end, but actually, if you have any questions along the way, I believe we have a chat open.
Yeah, we do, and I'll keep an eye on those questions and ask some that I think might need to be asked during the presentation itself.
And I think that will help make this hour go by quicker, because I don't know if any of you have ever done any of these presentations, but an hour is a long time to listen to yourself talk. So
exactly. No, I'll definitely I have some questions already for you throughout. So yeah.
All right. So the first thing we have to do when it comes to trafficking is let's look at exactly what is involved. And obviously, I've already mentioned, everybody talks about sex trafficking, and that for many reasons. The majority of them very, very good reasons. That's immediately where our mind goes. However, the labor trafficking situation is actually arguably as big or bigger than the sex trafficking. It also impacts an entirely different set of people. So here you have one crime, trafficking, that ensnares a wide array of victims into it. Obviously, when it comes to sex trafficking, all sex work is not sex trafficking, and I just want to make that clear. There's that this is not about equating one with the other. That's certainly not the case. However, I will tell you this, that a lot of sex work can be labor trafficking. And so we see the complexity of how these crimes are defined. I mean, in the United States, the basic notion, the basic definition, when we're talking about trafficking, we're looking for force, fraud, or coercion. So people that go through, that are either forced, coerced, or are some way defrauded into performing sex work that is going to benefit obviously another person, to commercial sex acts, or into labor. And the labor portion of it is this: at least in the United States, all work, including work that may be deemed illegal, right? Sex work is not legal in all of the United States. It's only legal in some very, in certain places. However, all of those workers are covered by labor laws, even if the work they are performing is not deemed legal. Kind of like the same way that, even if you make money in an illegal business, the United States Internal Revenue Service still expects you to declare it and pay your taxes on the illegal money that you made, right? We've all heard
Yeah, I
of
saw that.
that. We've all heard of that famous, the famous case is Al Capone, right? He didn't go down for being a gangster, for killing people, for being involved with drugs. He forgot to pay taxes on the money he made, right? So, and when we're talking about this model, we're talking about the combination of three things. And this is really more on the law enforcement side. But if you're, if you want to sort of work your way into like, what makes sex work legal sex, or what turns legal sex work into perhaps labor trafficking, because it can happen and it does happen. And it's what is known as the AMP model, the action, means, and the purpose. So the action is, can somebody, the person that's perpetrating this crime, does that person either induce, recruit, harbor, or transport somebody by means of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of commercial sex work, or some kind of labor services, right? So now if we go back and keep this in mind, if we expand that bubble to say, have we been maybe exposed, or have we come across trafficking, if we're talking about sex trafficking as well as labor trafficking? I would have to say that most of us would say yes, right? Because if we go to the next slide, these are the types of businesses that have a high risk for both labor and sex trafficking. And let's say that nobody on this call has ever been to an illicit massage business or a strip club, or has partaken in escort services. And that's cool. However, we all live somewhere, right?
Mhm.
So who built our house? Who's building those skyscrapers going up in our downtown areas? The nail salons that we may frequent, or our family members may frequent. What's going on? What's going on there? Cleaning
Right.
service. Who is cleaning our offices? Who is cleaning the offices all around us? Or even our homes, right? Everyone has at least once been to a restaurant. So how is that working, right? And even in healthcare, hospitality is, obviously the biggest one. And being here in Honolulu, which is the economy runs on hospitality. The fact that it may not be obvious to you doesn't mean it's not actually happening. And a lot of that has to do with how business works, right? Everybody's trying to get into a place where they can make the most, they can maximize their profits. And so this is why I think a lot of us, knowing, witting and unwitting, have probably been involved or had some kind of contact with some type of trafficking. I mean, look, everything agriculture, right? We all talk about eating our vegetables, where how are those vegetables picked, and how are they transported, and how are they grown, and what's, these are all areas that are vulnerable. Not to say that everyone, and I want to also make that clear, this is not an indictment on the entire industry. This just says, look, if you are in this industry, you really need to pay attention to this, because this is important for you. Now, why is this important to the financial industry? Well, and if we go to the next slide,
Okay.
All of these businesses are going to have some kind of touch to the formal financial system. Every single one. Even, industries that are involved in some type of illegal activity or that are 100% illegal, right? Let's just talk about the 100% illegal, because everybody's gonna say, well, none of my customers are involved in any of this because they're all upstanding, corporate citizens. Well, the trouble is that the world is so interconnected that the likelihood that your institution is being brushes against or actually has interaction with individuals involved, not just in human trafficking, but really in all types of illicit activity, is really, really high, right? It's as set in stone as that, the sun will come up in the morning. Absolutely. If, that's one of those things where, again, it cannot be helped simply because of the volume of transactions going on around the world. This is something that happens. And the more we try to connect with each other, the more financial services and the more connectivity and the more efficiency that we find in the financial system, the higher the chances of us interacting with these illegal funds come about. So when you're looking at your customer base, when you're looking at your interactions, your business interactions, this is where the know your customer and customer due diligence portion of your AML program is going to be the key, right? I can sit here and I can tell you, this is going to be very complicated and you have to do all sorts of algorithms and do all sorts of research, and all sorts of databases and data mining. You can. However, it all starts with your KYC and your CDD programs. Why? Well, because a lot of this stuff is going to be very, very simple, right? If you have a customer and you know that they're involved in one of these industries that has a high risk of being involved, again, witting or unwitting in some kind of trafficking, perhaps that's where you need to really step up your KYC. Actually visit these places, implement different ways to do what is widely known as trust but verify. Yeah, you can trust your customers. You can trust the documentation that they give you. However, you must also independently verify that what they're giving you is what you think it is, instead of something that is meant specifically to sort of throw you off the track. And this is from the Liechtenstein initiative, and this is something that they an initiative that they have called FAST, which I highly recommend. They have a lot of information on there on how the financial industry can help both in the fight against, to identify human trafficking transactions, but also how to help victims and survivors. And when we're talking about why people go into why people become involved with trafficking, especially on the labor side, a lot of it is because there's no access to legitimate, traditional financial services. So when there is a lack of access on a legitimate level, obviously there's going to be a black market, there's going to be some kind of underground industry that is going to provide that service because the demand for the service is there. So, when we talk to people that have gone and have, gone into debt bondage and been part of trafficking networks, a lot of it has to do with, look, we, X happened, we took out a loan and all of a sudden we're in over our head. Or there's obviously all of the issues with the everything happening all over the world and people utilizing these services to get smuggled into the US or into countries around the world, and then being unable to pay that smuggling fee. And then you have a smuggling act turns into a trafficking situation. So I think that in terms of the ability of the financial industry to help both on the discovery side, right, by identifying these industries and identifying these perpetrators and identifying those transactions, can also go into preventing people from falling into that. And I think that is obviously an internal review of the financial services that you offer to see is, are these services available to individuals of perhaps lesser means that still need them in order to live their day-to-day life? And when it comes to this, obviously, certainly not anywhere near as tragic as this, but I can tell you this. I said, look, I've been working for the US government for 25 years. For 25 years, I have banked at a credit union, which in the United States, it's a very small institution, primarily because if I bank at one of the big banks, they're going to charge me all sorts of fees. They're going to ask that I have a minimum amount in my account every single day, and if I fall below that, then they're going to charge me additional fees, right? So because of all of those fees, I said, well, I don't really want to do all that. So even for somebody like myself, and I've been a government employee for going on 28 years, I still find that the big financial services companies, they're not made for me, right? If I could keep $5,000 or $10,000 in my account and a balance every single month, yeah, it wouldn't matter. But what about those people that don't? And I think this is what the Liechtenstein Initiative is talking to in terms of making financial services in the financial industry aware of how those policies may have an impact on something like this, which you wouldn't normally sort of relate to, but it does,
Right.
because these are then the people that have to get that they have to get that loan from someplace else. They have to do something, right? Because something has to be done. And the amounts may not be large, but in terms of the impact, it's all relative, right? So $500 to somebody that makes $1 million is nothing, but $500 to somebody that makes $1,000 is a lot. So it's not
Right.
even.
So, yeah. So a bank or cooperative, financial service in a smaller jurisdiction, they would need to actually look at their requirements for opening an account and making sure that they're helping those who are currently unbanked get banked. Otherwise, those people end up going into the underground system and then could be forced or fall victim of fraud that then puts them into a trafficking situation.
Exactly, and that's exactly what that's exactly what the danger is there. And if we can go to the next slide.
Okay.
Now, because of the because how in the amount of interconnectivity that we currently have in the worldwide financial system, which is obviously great, and this is what we want, because I think some of us that are older can remember. I remember when I first got my the very first ATM card that I got, I could only use it at the ATM that belonged to my institution, where I actually had my money. Which
Right.
was great as long as I was close to there. But if I was someplace else, it was a little bit of a hassle. And if you traveled overseas, it was a mess. We no longer have that, right? We're now able to withdraw funds from multiple locations, even if we have our funds in one currency in one country. We can travel to another country using the exact same ATM card that we use at home, and we can withdraw money in that other country in local currency seamlessly, which is great. However, when it comes to financial institutions, this is where it really gets difficult, because all of a sudden it becomes about your transaction chain, right? And we're all, we especially these days, we're all familiar with disruptions in supply chains. And there is such a thing as a transaction chain. This is all of the, in this, and this is also from the FAST initiative, where they call it the upstream and downstream and downstream clients and risks. So there are services that may be being provided to your financial institution that are just everyday services that may need to be reviewed in terms of how those companies, those are you are a customer of theirs now, how are they operating, right? And they have nothing to do with finances, but it's, the individuals that help you recruit talent. How is that working? How are you, are you bringing people on board as employees, or are they contractors, and how is the contract firm working, and what is going on there? And obviously everything down to the janitorial services and how that company is doing, and what type of benefits people are being offered, what type of safety nets, because obviously to the institution, since you're a customer, you're going to want to lower your cost, right? That's always what you're chasing. But by doing that, you may inadvertently be contributing to an environment that is promoting, some of this trafficking. And then obviously, when it comes to the financial services that you're offering, one of the things that that is often overlooked is how sophisticated organizations that are involved in human trafficking are. So the notion is that these are rather crude, and it's cash based, and the transactions are very, very small, right? That's what I always hear from financial institutions, like, well, but those transactions are so small, we could never lower our thresholds to that level. So, well, but why are you assuming that they're small? And I can tell you that the trend right now, and this is something that has been going on for a while, the trend is actually very, very much like the type of criminal laundering activity that we're seeing from very large organizations, right? Because that's what this is. We're talking about an industry that collectively worldwide is responsible for about $150 billion in profits collectively, right? Sex and labor. $150 billion is a lot of money. If I told you, and if I told you that, I was the CEO of a company that made $150 billion a year, you'd be pretty impressed. You'd be like, man, that's a good businessman, right? And you would assume that my company was utilizing highly sophisticated methods to deal with my finances. And for some reason, when it comes to human trafficking, people always go to, oh, those are small transactions, right? And it's almost like they give up. We're seeing consistently the use of front companies, the use of LLCs, the use of companies that are utilized, from in offshore locations, specifically to create distance between the crime and the individuals, the beneficial owner of the funds. We're constantly seeing the use of brand new or developing alternative payment methods, right? So we're seeing a growth in the ability of these and the nimbleness of these organizations to use a lot of the cryptocurrencies that are out there, right? That is something that has been happening not just with human traffickers, but it's been happening with criminal organizations overall. And so I think that's where the financial sector can really, really help. Open up the aperture, right? Don't just assume that all of the money, that if you have transactions with, large dollar transactions with sophisticated methods being utilized, don't just assume that that has to be drug money, because it actually doesn't, and it probably isn't. That's one of the other things that we that one of the other misnomers that are out there. Actually, the biggest the biggest crime worldwide, moneymaker worldwide, and it actually contributes to this, is actually corruption. High-level public corruption. Kleptocrats buy and sell drug dealers. Drug dealers need to pay off kleptocrats in order to operate, right? So, and human trafficking has been projected to be moving up in terms of the amount of money, the amount of profits that it's generating for criminal organizations, because it's a crime where you have low investment, high return, right? When you are setting up a major, say, drug organization, you have all sorts of things that you have to spend money on in order to then get the return. When you're talking about trafficking, the commodity is people, and people are reusable. And as a result, there's very little overhead for these organizations. So most of the money they make actually is profit. Were you going to say something, Kim?
No, I was just kind of, at one point you talked about some of the less complex transactions. Of course, the things I think about are like Cash App and Venmo, where money is kind of just, I could send $200 to somebody, very easily, just as long as I know their Cash App account. I mean, are you saying that they're kind of using those kind of new services?
Yes, and what they're doing is then all of those transactions, and the idea is not to just look at the transaction, but really to look at the flow of the funds.
Mm-hmm.
Once you look at the flow of the funds, you'll be able to see where those single $200, $100, $50 transactions are all being funneled, if you will, into an LLC. And
Right.
that's where, that's sort of where all of that money is aggregated. We're also seeing that if you look at, for instance, the businesses that we had up on the screen before, right? The massage businesses, the nail businesses. If you look at the corporate records for those businesses, and if you look again as part of your KYC and your customer due diligence, if you look at that, those corporate records, you're going to find that it's not just one. For instance, nail salon. That nail salon will be connected to another LLC. They'll have directors and other officers in the LLCs that are consistent, and that you will begin to create a chain of 7 or 8 different businesses that are in different parts of a city and that are involved in different, like in different aspects of the economy. And this is how these organizations diversify their portfolio. This is run exactly like you would run a Fortune 500 company. And I think that's the other aspect of this that that is really important for the audience. Do not underestimate how sophisticated these individuals are, and sort of everything that all the connections that you're going to have as an industry. Now, if we can go.
So, and just kind of going back there, because again, I think, because I used to work in the Caymans, so, I did a lot of the corporate, side, setting up a bunch of different, companies for different people. So if I was wanting to set up an LLC, I might want to look at, where does their money come from? Who's the UBO, the ultimate beneficial owner? But then I might also want to look as well at that beneficial owner and some other things that they might own that might not necessarily be our client, to see again if there's some other, I would call them cash intensive businesses, like the restaurants and the casinos and things, things like that, to see even if they might not be a customer of mine, or their other LLCs or their other companies might not be a customer of mine, I'd still want to see how else is my main customer, that ultimate beneficial owner, how else are they involved? So maybe as a financial institution, or some kind of service provider that's having to do AML, anti-money laundering, the client due diligence. If I was going to be a money launderer, I would take my business to lots of different people, so no one person, no one financial service provider sees my whole portfolio, so to speak. So that could be another way that our AML professionals here could dig a little bit deeper, I would
Yes, I mean,
think.
these organizations, that's exactly right. These organizations are going to take countermeasures. They're going
Mhm.
to know that there are certain things that are going to trigger additional scrutiny by financial institutions. Therefore, they're going to preempt that and do things to minimize the, the attention that they may get, based on their transactional activity and, their physical location in some places. So that is, yeah, that's absolutely, in terms of looking at the transactions and looking at the risk that your institution may be in, that is the way to look at it. It's not it's what's in front of you and what you don't know that needs to be analyzed together in order for you to evaluate that particular customer's risk to your institution.
Mhm. I'm also seeing a lot of similarities to smurfing. Are you familiar with that term?
I am, and yes, I think that's the ways that the money gets into the financial system. Obviously, um, those are changing because we're becoming less and less of a cash society, and I know that there's still some um, jurisdictions where people will say, oh, cash is king, and it
Mhm.
may well be. But I think the bottom line is all of those individuals that have cash have one goal in mind, and is how do I get this cash into the financial sector? So yes, I mean the methods to introduce that cash into the financial sector are, they're the same. Those have never changed because those are limited pretty much by the by the process. So, you're going to see a lot of what, smurfing, or you're going to see a lot of that as well. But again, as some of these industries and as society itself becomes more comfortable with electronic payments, we're going to just see that, the cash influx come in. But the challenge with the electronic payments is if you look at how the worldwide AML regime is set up, everywhere around the world, including the United States, everything is focused on identifying cash coming into a financial institution or leaving a financial institution. That it was great for the 1970s, the 1980s, right? We all saw, Scarface and the duffel bags of money, but that doesn't, it's just not, it, I hope it doesn't happen anymore, but it's
Yeah,
also
I
not,
don't think it does.
but I also think it's not realistic, right? So I think the other way to look at it in terms of a financial institution is to say, yeah, the rules ask me to focus a lot on cash and less on electronic transactions. But the truth of the matter is, in 2022, that that focus has been overcome by events. A
Yeah.
lot, most I would say, of the transactions that should be scrutinized are occurring via electronic payments, be it domestic or be it international. And that's where the risk, not just to your individual financial institution, but really, in my personal view, to the entire AML system continues to lie until we expand that and open that aperture, whether it's done by legislation or just as an institution, if you want to be forward leaning, to say, look, I'm going to look at every transaction, cash or electronic, and I'm going to be looking for these. Where that is a significant vulnerability that exists in the worldwide financial system when it comes to AML, and will continue to until that is minimized.
Okay. I'm just saying we've got about another 16 minutes, so I just wanted just to kind of move on because I am getting quite a few questions and comments that I wanted to also share with you towards the end when we get to the question stage, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So, let's not lose sight of the fact that behind all of this criminal activity, behind all of these profits, are individuals, men, women, boys, girls, from every single nation around the world that are suffering as a result of the activities of these criminal organizations. I know that, especially in law enforcement, but also when it comes to AML, everybody's focused on finding, and I said it before, finding the bad guys and finding the bad money. And that's great. But this is one of those situations where I think we need to also see how we can help, number one, on the prevention, and then help survivors become, or victims become survivors. A lot of what you see, especially when it comes to sex trafficking, because of the type of exploitation, there is physical exploitation of the individuals in both sex and labor trafficking. But in sex trafficking, especially, there is financial exploitation of the individuals. And what the effect of that is that these individuals then end up with terrible credit. And in the United States and in countries around the world, that is a very big deal, right? That's how you're going, when you go get a job, they're going to do your credit, your credit check. When you're going to go rent an apartment, it's your credit check. All of these different things, right? It's the avenue by which a lot of doors are open. What the financial industry can do is there are organizations that are focused on helping human trafficking victims and survivors in every nation around the world. This is my plea for you to look for them as an institution and look for ways that you can help those individuals that are, have been victimized, simply by letting them, open up a bank account and have a bank account. So that they can get themselves back on their feet. Because that is very, very important. It's one of the things that's like, look, and we hear this from survivors all the time. They're able to get out. They want to do better, but then there are these roadblocks that come up. And that is where financial institutions can be so helpful, because the financial industry is in the, it's in the middle of everything that we need for people to get ahead.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he is a psychologist that helps. It's I guess a home, like a halfway house for survivors of trafficking here locally where I live, and we were just chatting about it. So I didn't realize it was that close to home myself. But yeah, he was talking about how they do it's survival. It's a home for them to go to. But then I was kind of thinking there's also, it's more than just being able to open a bank account, it's the education as well, as far as how do you have a credit score, how do you legitimately get a bank account or a credit card, or
Yep.
get an apartment, because sometimes many of these people, they have been very disadvantaged even from a young age, and might not have the basic understanding of contracts, of getting an apartment lease, for instance. So finding ways to educate them as well on things that the rest of us think everybody knows naturally, which is not necessarily the case.
When it comes to supporting victims and survivors, the last thing I'll say on that is this. In the United States, we find that victims of human trafficking come from all across the socioeconomic ladder. So obviously, you individuals that are, born into situations where they're more at risk, all the way up to individuals that are born into very wealthy, very well-to-do families. So this type of crime, in terms of this type of victimization, rather, does not discriminate based on your economic status, does not discriminate on how, how close of a family that you have. It doesn't. It just happens, and it happens everywhere. So, with that, I'd open it up for questions.
Okay, yeah, we do have a few questions here. I want to go through to a couple of slides that I had prepared as well. So in preparation for today, I did a lot of research because I'm not a human trafficking expert by any means. So I was kind of doing some of my own research and found out this is the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. It's a U.S. law that comes into effect June 21st, so just next week, where they are banning the goods of certain products from the U.S. So, and they're being stopped at the border, or will be stopped at the border. And it's for certain goods produced in the, if I hope I'm pronouncing correctly, the Xinjiang province in China, because they're saying that that is part of forced labor. And another one, so for those of you who want to look into that, please, there's some more information about that. And these were some of the indicators of forced labor that I found. Of course, that isolation, retention of identity documents, obviously the violence, debt bondage, any kind of abusive working conditions and living conditions. And kind of going back to our polling question, I would have had to answer, yes, I think I have come across it as a consumer personally. And that particular instance, it's a legitimate massage company where you go in, you can just walk in and get a massage, and they have the chair massages, but no one speaks English. And I always, when I go there, I go, are these people here on their own accord? Do they, are they getting paid a decent wage? It's just one of those things that just kind of bothers me a little bit. Same thing with like nail salons that you kind of mentioned as well. I was also looking into the various industries as well and some of the countries. And I apologize, I do have some of the further resources slides as well. And I've noticed one of you has already kind of mentioned the Customs and Border Control here in the US. That they're starting to name some names with these WROs, which are called workforce release orders. But what they're doing here in the US is if they suspect that these goods or services that are being imported into the U.S. are due to forced labor or human trafficking, it's called a workforce release order, WRO, and I guess they make these companies then prove that they are not using forced labor, and they're naming names, and there's some website links that I'm going to show as well here in the next few slides. But some of these are the industries and some of the countries that are particularly high risk. And I was quite surprised. Things like tobacco, I didn't know about that. Obviously I knew about mining, but disposable rubber gloves. I mean, that was, very specific. Even hair products. And there's also two particular vessels, shipping vessels, and I think they're fishing vessels that have been named. So they're not companies, but they're shipping vessels. So anybody who's involved with these shipping lines, whether it's insurance, that's something you want to kind of look into as far as your KYC for your due diligence. This is a website that I found, and that I do recommend. You can actually search for, you can go through and you can see some of the names of what these are, those WROs, and it will actually, sorry, I'm just trying to find the right website. Maybe it's this one here, I can't remember. Oh, one of those compliance tips was kind of like, if you're onboarding a corporate entity that's in a particular industry that is particularly high risk, or in a certain country, oftentimes I've Googled, in addition to like the sanctions checking and things like that, you always do the Google to see what kind of pops up. And I actually used one particular that's named, let me see what there it is. It's a company in Malaysia. If you just Google the name of the company, their website comes up, all this legitimate information comes up. But if you Google the name of that company plus the words forced labor, then a lot more information comes up. And I just thought that was very interesting as a compliance officer, how you would do a little bit more due diligence on these companies that you're currently onboarding or doing business with, particularly even as a vendor as well. Going back to some of these other slides as well, and John, you mentioned this one, freedomseal.com. Did you want to tell us a little bit more about them?
Yeah, so Freedom Seal is actually a company that was started by a friend of mine, Rani Hogg, who is a survivor of labor trafficking. And so this, through her company, she keeps track of all of these companies around the world that are part of, multiple and varying supply chains that would raise red flags. And the idea is her idea is to work with manufacturers to, state that they are labor trafficking aware and free, and then also make the process of identifying companies that are high risk a little bit easier for companies around the world. So, it's just, sort of the growing, growing awareness of how interconnected all of this is.
Yeah, yeah. And that's an excellent resource, because again, coming from a compliance perspective, it's how do you do the due diligence? And that was something that I was looking for in my research and preparation for today. It's like, there's got to be some agencies out there that are giving these seals of approval, or vice versa, highlighting those who have some allegations against them. And of course, that the Customs and Border Patrol. The only thing I kept finding was U.S. based agents that were naming names. So those were some of the challenge that I was having coming from an AML compliance situation. These are some other websites as well. And again, the slides, if anybody wants copies of these slides, please do reach out to me. My email will be at the end of this as well. But I'll also try and provide them as links where I can. I've already kind of gone through that slide. This is another one, the businesshumanrights.org, and you can search for the name of the company that you're onboarding or you're doing business with, or going to use as a vendor. And if there is any allegations against them, it brings up some of the different articles. So I thought that was very, very useful as well. So that you can add that to your compliance programs. The other one that I found is, if you are, for instance, like a payment processing company or a small bank, and you might have individuals that are your customers. I was looking at, it's a very large handout. Number 3 is the handout. So please go ahead and download that. And there's some questions in it that you can ask these individuals to see if they could be a victim of forced labor. And I just thought that if I was working for a bank or a payment processing company, I kind of think of things like, Wells Fargo, but the Western Union, where people are kind of going in and sending money home a little bit, because I'm sure they still get a little bit of money that they might have to send home, and they're probably unbanked. I thought those were very good questions. So please, if you're in that kind of industry, feel free to download that handout and look at it. And like I said, implement it in your customer questionnaires to see if you can find any victims. And of course, if you are putting together awareness training, everybody's welcome to use these recordings, by the way. So you can go to our website at silocompliance.com, and we have a AML Gray Matters section that has all of our old webinars, and of course we'll be sending out the recording, but there's some more. There's lots of resources out there, a lot of reports, a lot of global reports that just the figures and the stories are just heartbreaking. But these are 2 that I found that I thought were really, really good. So let me go back to some questions real fast that we had. See if I can find. Sorry, we had quite a few. Somebody says, has the Comply Chain app and the Sorry, some of these questions I can't quite understand. It says DOL has the supply chain app and the sweat and toil app. So it's, I think he's talking about a particular application, or somebody might be able to have some more information out there. Sorry, I couldn't quite figure out. Oh, they are apps where customers can view if products are made with forced labor. Okay, that's it. And it's called DOL, Michael, if you don't mind. Can you just spell that out for us?
Department of
DOL.
Labor is probably
Department of Labor. Okay, so they have a supply chain application and a sweat and toil app. Okay, do you know anything about that, John?
I do not.
Okay, all right. Somebody else, Jeremy, he asked, would the forced labor implications generally come up on a KYC database, such as these screening tools, Accurus and WorldCheck? It's interesting that you say that, Jeremy, and that is because I actually did a search earlier, and no, it did not come up on the application that I used. So I was actually a bit surprised, and I'm going to be actually reaching out to them and saying, hey, look, you guys should be adding this as a tool to your their tool. I thought that was a very good question, Jeremy. Somebody else writes, okay, very similar to what I'd already mentioned about the WROs. So he's made a few comments as well about that, and he's giving some links. So I'll try and get those out to everybody in an email as well. Thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate that. And somebody says, when you see a KYC of a client, we should look into how many companies the person is a director also. Will that help? And I think that goes back to that point that I made. You might have a company and a UBO that, as your customer or client, but then you also want to look where else are they a UBO or involved in other companies, even if they are not your customer or your client. So yeah, I do think digging down into everything that your client does as much as you can is good. Oh, somebody asked about a land-based casino, and if I recall correctly, she is with a casino and a hotel. I want to say in Panama. I'm not sure if that's absolutely correct. Because is there do you have any pointers for a land-based casino to deal with human trafficking? And I'm going to assume she is talking about like the customers that might be coming in to put the funds into the casino. Do you have any experience with that, John?
Well, I think with casinos, and I would say I would expand that to say the hospitality industry, and I think in terms of fighting human trafficking, I think sex trafficking is going to be the primary threat there, the primary risk.
Okay.
And so one of the things is to educate your frontline personnel, making sure that the individuals that are actually having that interaction with the clients are aware of those signs, the physical signs of trafficking, also the that they have, how often people stay, right? Because always somebody that stays there every week and we're like, oh my God, that's a great customer, but they may not be there to actually stay. That may be part of the trafficking, right? Of the exploitation of somebody else. That's why they are utilizing your hotel. If they're staying, it's all of those. So I think training of frontline personnel on identifying signs of trafficking and of individuals being trafficked, and then making sure that they have the resources to contact the proper authorities to follow up is really important in that context.
Okay. And another person, thank you very much for that. Another person is asking, she's saying that she's seen some consultancy firms being used for human trafficking. That's kind of a new one for me. I mean, I would see consultancy firms being things like for bribery and kind of, payments under the table to politicians, to PEPs. But I'm not so sure I would have seen that for human trafficking. What's your experience there?
I think we'd have to. It may be an issue of trying to figure out what the person means by consultancy. Because if that's an organization that, like in the U.S., where They are workforce type, a workforce type company, right? They provide a workforce for individuals. They contract, they have contract workers. Then,
Okay, yeah.
then yes, then I would say they're often involved because the individual hires the company, and then the individual that does the hiring does not verify everything about, they don't do their due diligence on the company that they're hiring because they're just looking at the bottom line. In other words, they hire the company that charged them the least amount for the services that they need.
Okay. Yeah. And Steve, thank you. He mentions that there is the FATF paper, Financial Flows from Human Trafficking. It was published in 2018. So if you do want some more reports for your awareness training or to dig a little bit deeper, please do go to the FATF website and you can look for that report as well. So that's a very good one. We're going to wrap up here soon because we're past the hour. Sorry, we did start a little bit late. One of the things I like to do is put our guests on the spot and ask you to forecast. What do you think is going to happen in the next year regarding human trafficking, whether both as a trend or as laws? And what about in 10 years?
Well, I'm a glass full kind of a guy, glass half full kind of a guy. So I've seen significant improvement both in awareness and in the tools available to identify this type of activity and the focus on helping those that were victimized. I've seen that grow and grow. There are more resources that are being applied in the United States, for instance, over the last year or so. President Biden has done a lot to actually focus the effort and provided additional resources and directed both the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security to really look at trafficking as an activity. Within the Department of Homeland Security, we created the Center to Counter Human Trafficking, and you can find that if you Google CCHT and DHS. So there definitely is awareness is definitely on the rise. Within 10 years, I would hope, and this is a hope more than a prediction, I would hope that that we continue to improve and we continue to hone in on utilizing the type of sophisticated tools that we need to identify these types of sophisticated organizations. And collectively as a society, I hope that we provide that we become aware enough of how labor and sex trafficking touch our everyday lives, so that we can be more aware and perhaps help more people get out of a situation that we don't want anybody to be in.
Right. And just from my own research, I thought just from what I've seen happening in the past 5 to 10 years in the past, I thought that's grown so much. I mean, for instance, like the WROs with the customs border, and I don't know if other countries have similar laws, but I thought, gosh, if more countries did do this, then and more financial services, those who are AML regulated, would have to really look into the human trafficking aspect and maybe get certifications such as the Freedom Seal, and obtain them and offer them as part of their KYC and due diligence, especially in those higher risk industries. I thought I could kind of see that being more industry kind of standard for banking or providing financial services. Great, thank you. Okay, so just a couple more polling questions just to, again, get our audience some feedback. So again, we asked this question at the beginning. So Tom, if you don't mind launching it again, I just wanted to see how does it change for everybody? So again, the question is, have you ever come across it, human trafficking, personally or as an AML professional? And just to give a little bit of a background, so the first time we asked this question, 63% of you said no. 11% said yes, possible as a consumer. 11% said yes, possible as an AML professional. 7% said yes as a consumer, and 8% said yes as an AML professional. So let's see how those numbers have changed now. If you don't mind launching the answers, Tom. And thank you to Tom Gardner, who's behind the scenes. Okay, fantastic. So those who said no, it went from 63% to 24%. So John, I think you did a very good job with raising awareness with just from that change alone. That's fantastic. Before 11% said possible as a consumer, now 35% are saying possible as a consumer observer. So I won't go into all of it, but the answers definitely changed. And so I think you've done a great job, John, again, raising it. And thank you to the audience for listening and being here today. I really do appreciate it. Next question, after today's presentation, do you think you can do more to ensure that no clients or customers are victims of or profiting from human trafficking and forced labor practices? Again, as a former compliance officer, John, I could definitely say, again, it's been 10 years, but I do still work with some of our users, and sometimes I help them with updating their compliance manuals a little bit, and I think there's definitely ways I can help them roll out some more, whether it's the client questionnaires or just another step to due diligence. But yeah, so our audience right now is Tom, if you don't mind launching the answers. But 52% are saying yes, they can include additional line of questions. 70% are saying yes, we can do more awareness training. And 3% feel that they have sufficient procedures in place. So that's fantastic. So again, thank you very much for that. John, did you have anything to say to those answers?
No, I think this is fantastic. This is actually the first time I get a poll to actually test how well I'm able to deliver a message. So that's actually pretty informative for me. So that's great.
I think you did a fantastic job.
I'm very persuasive.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. All right. So before we go, please follow Silo Compliance System on LinkedIn so you can get future invites to. We do have these webinars about once a month. My name is Kimberly Smith again. You'll probably find me as a employee of Silo. That's how you'll find me. Feel free to connect or follow John. John, you always post some great articles and headlines. I really enjoy following you. Thomas Gardner, he's also with Silo, and he's the one that kind of does our promotion. He's the guy that kind of pushes it out there. So make sure you follow him as well. And for those of you who do share and you share your certificates and you share these events with your colleagues, please do keep sharing. It's helping us grow. So it's fantastic. The more we can do to help keep everybody strengthening their knowledge is great. And again, we'll pull a winner for that Silo cooler bag. We'll announce it in the next broadcast. And today's recording will be sent out via email. We usually get those out on Friday. And the next webinar, so for those of you who have been following us, we've had sanctions. We're going to have another one in July. And so we're calling it Sanctions 3, and that'll be an update on all the Russian sanctions, because I know that's a very big deal for everyone as in the AML professional. And again, these are just some of the technical solutions. So if any of you are looking for whether it's the silo, like a kind of a CDD management, because the due diligence, it's all over the place. You gotta have so many pieces of paper, and I am a co-founder of that, so you can reach out to Tom. We also offer a continuous penetration with all the cybersecurity situations going on, so you can contact our head of IT there. There's robust data privacy governance offered by BDO in Jersey. And of course, there's some other sanctions tools and transaction monitoring tools. So just reach out to me at any time, and I can refer you on to those tools if you are needing to get more technical solutions. And that is really it, I think. So John, again, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your expertise with us.
My pleasure. Can I just one more plug, if you allow me
sure.
to? Just want to plug, if the DHS, Department of Homeland Security in the US, the DHS Blue campaign, for all of those, for all of you who are looking to get that, to raise awareness and to get material, that is
Okay.
actually a really good source for information on raising awareness. So DHS Blue Campaign, if you Google that, that is in a videos, pamphlets, all sorts of information on how you can participate and how to help us raise awareness and help those in need.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. So those of you who are need to do that, please. DHS Blue Campaign. That's fantastic. And one other question did come in. James, I will respond to you separately, and because we are going to have to go here soon. But again, thank you to our audience. We know your time is super valuable. So thank you for spending some of that time with us today. I do hope, as always, that you found today's broadcast informative and it can help you strengthen your AML program and your in-house training. So again, please, for anybody who's wanting to know more about Silo, stay on. We will play a little 2-minute demo video for you. And John, just so you know, I've already got lots of thank yous, informative session comments. So that's fantastic. Sounds like everybody is very happy, and I appreciate your time and your service for what you're doing for the victims. I'm sure you've seen some very heartbreaking stories. So thank you very much for your career.
Appreciate it. I appreciate the invitation. Thanks, everybody. And like I said, I'm always available. So anything that you need, feel free to reach out.
All right. Thank you. And until next time, this is Kimberly Smith signing off. Thank you.
Anti-money laundering compliance and customer and vendor onboarding involves multiple processes that must be done correctly and by the right people in the most efficient way. The tasks include gathering customer and vendor ID and verification documents, screening against sanctions and politically exposed persons lists, analyzing any reputational risk, periodic monitoring to assess any changes and updating due diligence, and staff training on money laundering, terrorist financing, bribery and corruption awareness and risks, as well as keeping them up to date on your policies and procedures and new regulatory requirements. In addition to the onboarding processes being strictly followed and documented, management must have access to critical compliance metrics and information to steer the company through regulatory waters and mitigate customer and other risks. With Silo Compliance System, these obligations become much more efficient. With Silo, your staff can enter the customer's information and upload due diligence documents and any other documents that you require. Key information entered about your customer automatically calculates a risk score, a calculation using a risk-based approach determined by you at initial implementation of Silo. In addition, if you have screening enabled, when the customer's name is first entered into Silo, the name is checked against sanctions, politically exposed persons lists, and adverse media. You'll see results of screening immediately and can review any potential hits right away. And with screening enabled, your customers and vendors are continuously monitored for any sanctions advisories, helping you get ahead of any potential reputational risks. No company is too small to benefit from using Silo. Even if your onboarding processes seem under control today, if one key staff member becomes unavailable or there is any increase in your customer portfolio, compliance with strict onboarding and review processes can quickly overwhelm a small company and put you at risk. Plus, implementing Silo can reduce the need to hire additional staff to manage compliance obligations and reduce your risk of non-compliance regulatory penalties and continued inspections. No one goes through an inspection or audit with great ease, but several users have reported that their inspections went more smoothly and with Silo they had improved outcomes. Reach out to us today to schedule a demo of Silo.